I know you've got ideas. I know you've got plenty of ideas. You've got this epic story in your head, this cute story, this amazing story, these characters that you're just ready to introduce to the world. But for whatever reason, you still have not started your comic. Is that you? Have you not started making a comic? Well, this episode of Panels in Progress is all about why you haven't started and providing some tips and tricks on how to get started. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Chris. Welcome to the channel, Panels in Progress, a channel about making comics and manga and learning through the process. And like I said, today, I want to know, why haven't you started your comic? Let me know in the comment section below, because I'm really curious if everyone has the same sort of reasons on why they haven't started their comic. I'm going to go over the top 4 reasons I didn't start my comic and what kind of held me back from starting about 3 years ago. My number 1 reason, my idea was way too big. I think a lot of us make this mistake as beginners. We all have read comics and manga that have these hundreds and hundreds of chapters, and we want to make something epic too. I mean, One Piece is massive, Berserk massive, Hunter x Hunter massive, Bleach, Naruto massive, long Dragon Ball Z as well as Dragon Ball. A long, sprawling story with all these characters in different parts of the world and different magic systems and everything. And it's like, we see that those stories are doing well and we love those stories so much that we want to make our version. We want to make a story just as epic. But what we fail to realize is that starting with an epic adventure, an epic story, we all have this idea that if we make a story, it has to be just as long, just as big. And that could be our downfall. The second reason I was not starting my comic was I didn't think my art was good enough. And it's interesting to say that because art is subjective. There's so many different art styles. There's so many different ways to tell a story. You could have the most detailed artwork, or you could have simple artwork. But if you're able to convey a story, that shouldn't stop you from telling your story. But I'm pretty sure most of us struggle with this one, is that we want our artwork to be better. And we're probably comparing our artwork to professionals or to indie creators that have been drawing for at least 10 to 15 years longer than we have, and now we think our artwork isn't good enough. The third reason why you might not have started your comic is you don't want to make something bad. You don't want to take your story that you've been thinking about for months or years and fuck it up. You don't want to mess it up. You don't want to ruin the idea that is perfectly in your head. And so instead of writing the idea down, instead of starting with a smaller story within that world, we just don't do anything. We just put it on the table and we say, one day I'll make this story. And the fourth reason I think that stopped me and might be stopping you from telling your story is that you don't know the next step. Sometimes, and I think a lot of this might have to do with social media, is that we see the final result of everything. We see the final result of a movie, the final result of an anime, a television show, or a comic. We see everything is perfectly lettered, colored, textured. Everything is already done. But sometimes, because we didn't see the build or the creation of these things, we have no idea to even begin. We have no idea what steps we should actually take to make our first comic. And that idea, it seems simple. It seems like making your first comic or manga should be easy. You make some boxes, you put the characters in the boxes, you make them say things, you pose them in cool poses, and bada bing, bada boom, you got a story. But even that can seem overwhelming, because what are the steps before the story? What are the steps before we actually start drawing? So not knowing the steps could also be a way to not start your comic. Are any of these reasons your reason? Let me know which reason is yours in the comments. I'm really curious to find out if your issues with not starting a comic matched mine. Alright, so we've got our reasons. We've got them all lined up. They are the usual suspects, and there might be some other reasons that I didn't even think of, or I might not have even experienced. But next, let's talk about, okay, how can we start? Well, first things first, take that idea and make it smaller. This idea can be as small as it needs to be. If this is your first comic, it doesn't have to be that grand epic that you want it to be. You can just pick a small part of your story. It doesn't necessarily have to be the beginning, it doesn't have to be the ending, it could be somewhere in the middle, an interesting scene. But you want to try to make it between 4 to 8 pages. 4 pages is a really tight story. 8 pages gives you a little bit extra to work with, but you want to start small because this is your first time. You've never done this before. Start small. Obviously, 4 to 8 pages, think of it as a guide rail. This is where you can experiment with a small short story or scene that is going to have a beginning, middle, and end. It doesn't necessarily have to conclude, but you want to keep those ideas limited. You want to narrow down the focus of your story. So let's start with something simple like pick one clear emotional moment. It could be 2 friends who are moving away, and this is the moment where they are saying goodbye to each other because they won't see each other again. It could be that someone is looking for something that they've been waiting to find, and you can show within 4 to 8 pages the journey of them finding this thing. You could arrange a situation where the character has to make a choice. It's a life-altering decision. Maybe they're internally frustrated about the decision they have to make and they can't figure out what to do, and you show them working it through, maybe talking to another person, maybe thinking about it, but eventually at the end of the comic, at the end of the scene, they arrive at their decision. Or it could be a what happens if situation. Someone is entering a world that they had no idea about. What are their first encounters of this new world? Or someone is escaping a world that they weren't supposed to be a part of. What is their encounter getting from the world that they were in to this new world? You can do this in 4 to 8 pages. You can do anything in 4 to 8 pages. You have to just make sure that your writing is really tight. And also, if this is your first comic, the scripting, don't worry about the formatting, especially if you're the one drawing it, because you already have the idea. If it makes logical sense in written words, then you can make it flow into a comic page. Make sure that you keep your cast small. 1 or 2 characters max. The more characters you have, the more pages you need to express who these people are to show this. But with 2 characters, you can do a lot of work in 4 pages. Especially, you can show the dynamic between the 2 characters, whether are these 2 people lovers, are these 2 people friends, are they enemies? You can show a lot between 2 characters and how they interact with each other just in 4 to 8 pages. With that limitation of characters, pick 1 scene, 1 location. Don't worry about switching locations, or if it is switching locations, make sure it's 1 area that's clearly defined and then somewhere in the middle there's another area. But I wouldn't go more than 2 areas, because the more establishing that you're doing, that's usually a scene switch. And then for the story beat itself, have 1 conflict. something goes wrong, something goes right, something is discovered or learned, like one major conflict for your character, just one. And then within that conflict, an emotional shift. The character goes from feeling excited about the move. Let's go with the friends who are, one friend is moving away and they will never see their other friend again. Maybe these two characters are sitting and enjoying a last ice cream for the summer. It's the end of the summer, the kid is moving. They are sharing an ice cream and reminiscing about, the things that they experienced. And then you have that tonal shift where finally they're working through the ice cream and working through the memory. Time is running out. That could be a theme. I kind of want to do a whole separate video on themes alone because I'm learning about them myself and I want to share what I'm learning with you guys. But the ice cream being eaten could also be reminiscent of the time, and as they work through the memories, the time is passing. And then finally, as the ice cream is gone, you sense the tension between, they don't want it to end. Maybe they're eating the ice cream slower because they don't want it to go away, because once that ice cream is done, the one person who's leaving has to get up. That could be one shift. You can, do you see how much you can show and pack into 8 pages if you really think about the workings of the story? All right, so that's the story part of it. You're writing your script, you're thinking about your characters, you're thinking about your tonal shift, your emotional beat, what the character wants. The next part is actually the fun part, where you are creating short, small character concepts, how the character is going to look, how the environment's going to look, before actually doing the thumbnails. The reason I recommend doing that before you do the thumbnails is because you kind of want to have an idea of what your character is going to look like and the staging that you can play around with when you do your thumbnails for your pages. And then obviously the next steps are inevitable. If you do most of the heavy lifting in your thumbnailing phase, your penciling phase and your inking phase is going to be all the easier. And depending on whether you're doing a comic or a manga, your coloring phase could be easier because you did a lot of thinking and thought in your thumbnail/pencil phase. And that's it. If you do these simple steps, I know it sounds like a lot, but you're easily going to be able to make your first comic. And all that's left to do after you make it is share it. Because ultimately sharing your work, I think it's good. Unless you just want to make comics for yourself, then feel free to make comics for yourself. I've made plenty of comics just for me, just because I didn't feel like sharing them. But if you want to share them, post them. There's so many ways that you can get your comic out there to people. People can find it and read it. And who knows, maybe they will love it as much as you loved making it. Yeah, you can post your comic, share it with friends, family, let other people read your comic, let people know that you're making comics. As you finish the comic, remember, you're not trying to make the perfect first comic. There is no such thing as the perfect comic. There is no such thing as the perfect first comic. Now, to a reader, we look at comics and manga and we're like, okay, it's perfect. I don't see how they could make it any better. But I'm pretty sure if you go to that artist or even the writer, they even have things that they saw in their work where they were like, I wish I could change this, that, or the other. I'm going to steal Jake's quote, finished, not perfect, because that is the truth. Finishing a comic is just as important as starting it to begin with. If you don't finish it, then you can't get the story out to the people to read it. And I'm pretty sure that people want to read the story. Contrary to what we see out there, I think that everyone wants something new. Everyone is looking for something new, something different, something unique. Even if, I think we all need something new. There's a lot of nostalgia. There's a lot of remakes, reboots, retellings. Everything seems to have already been done. But I think what it takes to get new things is having new people with different experiences telling new stories in a new way. And that could be you. So start with your first comic. So if you are one of those people who have always wanted to make a comic, you've thought about it, you really have all these ideas that you really think would be perfect for making a comic, then just start. If the 8-page comic or the 4 to 8 page comic seems too big, you can start even smaller. There are 1-page comics, there are 2-page comics, and there's ways to do all of them. All you have to do is start. So hopefully this video helped you guys. I'm hoping that you take this episode as a sign to finally start your comic. And if you want to know my process on working through a comic, check out my playlist where I'm making a short horror story comic and I'm taking you along for the ride. If you have any comments or any other questions, let me know in the comment section below. And until next time, let's make some progress.